Muses of Mythology is a spoiler-heavy podcast.
That's an understatement.
We're going to discuss not just the events of this book, but the Rhineverse as a whole, and really anything that we feel is relevant. You can find full spoiler warnings in the show notes.
Hey, Thor's got an energy drink skin where he's just a can of fucking Thunder Rage.
Okay, but that's
That actually
that I
kinda
get.
works. No, that makes sense.
What do you mean? He's just a literal can of soda.
No, Thunder
Yeah, sure,
Rage,
but
that
it's an
makes
energy drink.
It's an energy drink. He's Thor, yeah. Welcome to Muses of Mythology, a podcast where we talk about how ancient myths become part of modern pop culture through the lens of Rick Riordan's Magnus Chase and the gods of Asgard. This is story 100, Odin. I'm your co-host and podcasting muse, Darien Smart. Joining me is my co-host and brother, DJ.
How's everybody doing today? I'm DJ the Muse, and I've been playing a lot of Last Epoch recently. It's a good game.
I think, DJ, all you do is play games.
That's fact, yeah. It's getting to be a bit of a problem recently.
I could go to the most recent episodes and just do a whole compilation of you saying, recently I've been playing.
Because it's changing constantly.
That's true. You're always doing something new. Let's muse around the garden about it.
All right.
DJ,
What's up?
it's episode 100.
That it is.
Can you believe it's
100.
we've done 100 of these, and then almost 100 bonus episodes, and several dozen remyth episodes, and a handful of movie night episodes, and 36 Musemiss episodes?
I know. It's crazy.
That's a lot. We've done a lot of these.
Ton.
But episode 100, it's the big one. It says, so I think, Odin is a big topic, but it's not enough just to have a fun topic. We need to have some fun guests. And I am so excited that it all lined up and we get to have our friends from our sister show Standby Line joining us again. Hi, Tim and AJ.
Hey,
Hello.
it's been a hot minute since we've been here last.
It
Episode
has.
100, and it gets to be us being Odin's biggest haters for an hour.
I'm really, really excited to learn why. But don't tell me yet. We're gonna get into it. Actually, usually I ask, why did you want to be here? And I think the answer, as AJ just told us, is to hate on Odin.
Pretty much, yeah.
And I thought, it must be because of God of War. But in the notes, Tim noted, I have not played God of War. So I'm like, damn, I don't know why I hate Odin.
I haven't played the remake, but I have heard it's very valid to hate Odin in that context too.
But no matter how bad Odin is in that, it's not as bad as the one we're gonna get to.
I'm excited. Fantastic. So let's get into it. We got to start out as we always do. DJ, what's the deal with Odin in the Magnus Chase books?
Now, typically, we actually ask our guests, Darien.
Yeah, but our guests don't read these books.
That's insane. Odin, he's kind of a CEO, but he's not. I don't think he's quite CEO. He's more like CMO, Senior Marketing Officer, or not senior, Chief Marketing Officer.
Uh-huh.
And he's constantly looking for ways to advertise and push Valhalla a little further.
Which is interesting, because you don't have to advertise for Valhalla. No one chooses.
Really
Odin chooses them, actually.
Yeah, it's really good. Big fan.
Well, you can't deny the power of brand awareness.
I guess, except I think you don't even have to be aware of Valhalla to end up there.
I mean, how is getting into Valhalla supposed to be a great and beautiful honor if it's not one of the most exclusive places on the planet, specifically marketed as such?
This is another good point. AJ, how do you make sure you're getting people that truly deserve to be there unless there are people who don't get to go there and want to?
Exactly.
By the way, the last time we had y'all on was 2022 for our Happy Haunts episode.
Oh my god, it's been 3 years.
Yeah,
It's been going on 3 years. I didn't realize it was that long. Welcome back.
Neither did I.
We were literally in Disneyland together more recently than when I recorded last with y'all. Not Tim. Tim and I just recorded together recently.
We did.
So I guess this half counts.
all three of us have also recorded together since then. What?
That's also true. I think it's because we've been on standby line in that time space that I was shocked that I swear yes, but not for this show.
Yeah, you have been on.
And we've been on
Speaking of exclusivity.
And we've been on other stuff, like we were just on an episode of Gaming Theater Presents again.
Oh, that's another thing. It's like, I record with Tim and AJ all the time.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was like, oh my god, it's been 3 years. It took you saying that.
Exactly. It hasn't been a proper Muses episode since Happy Haunts.
So, yes. So, yes, sorry to interrupt, DJ. Absolutely, yeah. He's a very much... I also think he gives motivational speaker vibes, is a big thing with Odin in Magnus Chase.
I think, to a degree, I'll agree.
Well, doesn't he do seminars about how to be your best in Inhari self? Am I remembering that correctly?
Maybe. I remember him specifically having presentations on marketing and ways to spruce up Valhalla.
Maybe it's that. It's also, hey, this season's lasted a year. It's been a year since we've actually read the book. Yeah. That's not how this is supposed to go. This season got wild. I think the other thing is that Odin super loves to play Undercover Boss.
He does it
loves
frequently,
to play Undercover
and
Boss.
everybody for whatever reason does get worried and crazy when he leaves, even though chances are he's just somewhere in Valhalla.
Yeah, the first book opens.
It's kind of seeming like that's what happens.
Yeah, the first book opens and Odin's missing, and we find out he's just been this troll character. He's a half troll named X.
Yeah.
And then at the end he reveals, it's been me the whole time. I wanted to go undercover to see how you all would accept the... you're like, oh, okay, cool, dude. That's interesting. And then in 9 from the 9, it actually... So that's the first Odin thing. And then the last Odin thing we get from the series is him being like, I need to hire a new captain of the Valkyries. And he does some interviews and they all go poorly. And I've talked about how much I hate that. And then he's like, okay, I will just go ahead and disguise myself as a Valkyrie and go undercover and figure out who should be the new captain. And I'm like, how are you going to get away with that one? What's the story? Are you going to say I'm the new Valkyrie that Odin picked? You gotta know everyone's a little suspicious every time a new Valkyrie that Odin picked shows up.
What's my name?
Doesn't he, pick all of
them? Something weirdly ancient Norse that no person would actually be named today? Yeah.
Odina.
Yeah. Odette.
I mean,
Odette, there you go.
His half troll name was literally impronounceable to people. That's why they just called him X.
That's true. I forgot about that.
It's we can't say it with our mouths, so
call him X. Human beings cannot pronounce those sounds. It's not a laziness thing. It's our throat's not designed for those noises thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I would, what's okay. This may be controversial. I feel like Odin does way less in the Magnus Chase books than Zeus does in the Percy Jackson series.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't think it's controversial
less
at all.
Impactful.
What is Odin actually gonna do?
Good point. Well, I also feel like the thing that Odin does at the end is give Samira her job back.
Yeah.
And give them all rewards for doing a good job. And
the
that's
ability
it.
To kind of come and go from Valhalla as they please.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I'm glad he's different than Zeus. For sure, they shouldn't be the same kind of character. But it is, reflecting on it, another thing that's just interesting about the way it's structured. Hey, Tim,
I think that's also fairly characteristic of Odin. Zeus interferes in everything because Zeus is an asshole. Odin doesn't care, so Odin only gets involved when it's specifically Odin's job.
That's actually a great segue, AJ. Hey, Tim, AJ, what do y'all know about Odin from Norse mythology?
So Odin is the all-father of the Aesir, father of Thor, and sometimes Loki, depending on how it is. He's... I don't know if this is official, if this is how Snorri categorized him, but he's usually described as the god of magic. He gave up his eye to get infinite wisdom. He's got his ravens, Hugin and Munin, and he's a gigantic jackass.
I reread a huge chunk of the Younger Edda for this.
Aw! AJ, thank you!
It was a couple of weeks ago, so my memory of all of it is like 60% at best, but...
Anything jump out at you want to shout out?
I think Tim caught a lot of the broader context.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to mention that he's not just the god of magic. Odin is kind of sort of the god of, like, a third of everything. Like, I could list off domains he's held and take up at least 10 minutes. Like, battle, magic, royalty, theft, wisdom, courage, the alphabet, rage.
Yep. Literally the alphabets. We will get to that.
Yeah. Him being the god of the runic alphabet is just the funniest thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the only guys that can read it.
Or at least truly understand it.
Honestly, if I was the only one who could read, like, Latin or something like that, like, yeah, you guys got to come to me, fuckers. Fuck you, I'm not teaching you shit, okay? I'm the guy.
It'd be like if you could read Latin, but in reading Latin, you actually did magic. Like, it's actually it's both of those things. Like,
I'm the guy. Okay.
Yeah, like, I'm pretty sure, like, Tyr and Heimdall and, like, Freya can read, like, the runes as a language. Like, they are literate, but they can't do the magic thing.
They don't understand
the
runes.
thing that the runes do.
They can read runes. They don't understand runes.
I think that's what it is. We will...
And that's part of why Odin, like, sacrificed his eye and hung himself from the world tree, was that he could see and essentially understand everything.
Yeah, I had runes for later. We can do runes now. Let's do runes now.
Let's do runes.
Now. I'm just going to scroll my notes. Yeah, AJ, tell us more about the runes. What are the runes?
That's a good question. Because sources and interpretations differ wildly. To say that they're a language is definitely accurate, but they're also, much like a lot of pop culture represents them in nowadays, they're more like symbols of power, in a sense. They're not magic in the sorcery sense that a lot of people tend to think about magic.
Yeah.
But more so like latent inherent powers. I think a comparison I could make that I haven't heard made very often is it's almost compared to like the way myths about the Fae talk about the power of a name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially that Odin holds power over all of these things strictly because he understands them on a fundamental level.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's I think that is the, like, it's like you said, like, it's the runes or the symbols of the runic alphabet that the Germanic people were using before the Latin script got kind of like adopted as the mainstay for written language. Like the word for rune comes from a Proto-Germanic term that can roughly be translated to mean like secret or mystery.
Yeah.
And I think that also like deeply communicates what it is. Like you said, they're not just, hey, here's this symbol isn't just meant to communicate like a phonetic sound that human beings make with their mouths. It literally has a secret meaning behind it that if you understand it, you understand the essential secret language of the universe.
Yeah, and that's why in a lot of cases you also see them in very flowy artistic patterns, sometimes called cipher runes, because those are perceived to be like an artistic interpretation of linguistics.
And like communicating that like more layered meaning.
Yeah.
Nice. In trying to dive into Odin's specific relationship with the runes and like kind of not just like the stories around it, but like what does that mean? What do we understand from it? I've had a lot of places that claimed like the Norn had the runes first and then Odin wanted to learn it from them. But I couldn't find that corroborated within the Eddas. Like that, I'm not sure where that idea comes from. Rather, it seems like it was believed that Odin was the one who originated the runes. Specifically in a poem, Sayings of the High One, Odin describes actually how he came to discover the runes. And I will read you a verse now from Caroline Larrington's translation that we've been referencing literally all goddamn season. That I only just started like physically making marks in and like underlining passage. I don't know why it took me a year to be like, right, I can draw in this. It's my book.
I'm just so fundamentally averse to writing in my own books from school that like even now I can't do it.
I think that's what it is. And then finally I was like, oh, I'd love to just be able to cite this really quick and not just have the one sticky on the page, but see what I actually... Oh, I could just do... Meanwhile, over on my Aragon podcast, I'm scribbling in my Aragon book all day long. So, like, I don't know why over here I was like, can't write in the text.
I love finding books with notes in them. I cannot make a note in a book for the life of me. Can't bring myself to do it.
That's fair. Everyone has their own relationship with the books. Okay. I know that I hung on a windswept tree 9 long nights, wounded with a spear, dedicated to Odin, myself to myself, on that tree which no man knows from where its roots run. With no bread did they refresh me, nor drink from a horn. Downwards I peered. I took up the runes, screaming I took them. Then I fell back from there. 9 mighty spells I learnt from the famous son of Bolthor, Belsta's father, and I got a drink of the precious mead, I, soaked from Odir. I began to quicken and be wise, and to grow and to prosper. One word from another word found a word for me. One deed from another deed found a deed for me. And it goes on for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the idea that Odin literally hung himself from... It says like the word Yggdrasil is never used, but the general consensus from scholars is that this is the world tree. Like, it would be kind of wild if it wasn't.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately comes around to sort of the nature of the way the Edda was written, of being all of these different poems that were essentially later combined into one text. In their own purest form, you can't say it's Yggdrasil because the word didn't come up in the poem.
Yeah.
When you look at the later connections to other myths and other stories, then yes, it is probably the cosmic tree, but...
Yeah. You also have the element of, like, the original audience would have understood context without it having to be quite as apparent because of, like, the inherent, like, lived nature of the belief system. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's also an interesting thing. As the poem goes, just speaking a little bit more on... hey, Jay, you just gave me another really good transition that I want to like grab onto, but I don't want to leave this space just yet. So I'm gonna just stay in the space and we're gonna circle back. But like as the poem goes on, like Odin lists what runes he knows and what they allow him to do. For example, like calm disputes or protect comrades in battle or bring the dead back to life. But he never actually says or describe what that rune is. Like, it's let me read one of these to you. It's trippy. I know an 11th if I have to lead long loyal friends into battle. Under the shields I chant, and they journey confidently, safely to battle, safely from battle. Safely they come back from everywhere. And he knows, like, I know a 9th one, I know a 12th one, I know a 14th one. And I also kind of love that, where it's, like, lending to the, like, Odin knows these runes, but we... or the bard doing the poem, I don't know the runes. I could not describe the runes to you because only Odin knows this. And he's not sharing that information with anybody. He's just telling you I know it and I can do it, but I'm not sharing that wisdom with you.
Yeah, and I think there's also a point of it, and this comes up later in a passage I really like from the Prose Edda, where they essentially establish, we don't need to explain to you how much Odin knows because we couldn't. Only Odin can understand how much Odin understands. There's a passage from, and I think the note I have is from the Falk's translation. Odin sat in the throne that saw over all worlds and every man's activity and understood everything that he saw.
Yeah, that's a really good way of demonstrating wisdom, not just to see all things, but to understand, and not even just know all things, but to understand all things, I think is a depth of wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to grab onto the great transition that AJ... Do we have anything else on runes before I take us by the hand and lead us away?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. All right. AJ mentioned earlier about how, like, the thing about the Eddas is, like, all these poems were disparate pieces that all got kind of, like, brought together. And this poem, Sayings of the High One, is, like, a very good example of that. Because the poem is largely believed to be a collection of other poems or just general, like, oral sayings that all got combined under the umbrella of, like, Odin's great wisdom. Because this poem literally starts with things that, like, hey, be careful when entering doors. Like, hold on, I'll actually read the verse because it's... all the doorways before one enters should be looked around, should be spied out. It can't be known for certain where enemies are sitting in the hall ahead. And it's like, it just starts with like general good advice to have, and then ends up to like, hey, once I hooked up with a gal just so I could steal her dad's magic poetry liquor. I get it. Meat and liquor, not the same thing. It was funnier if I said liquor.
It is funnier if you said liquor.
And then after that, it veers into the story of Odin talking about how he learned the runes and all the runes he knows. Like, these are like very three wildly different people. It's like if you watch the most recent SpongeBob movie and you're like, these are three wildly different narratives that are somehow all within this same piece, and that's wild.
Yeah, and the prose edda, if I remember correctly, is written in like the 13th, 14th century. And it's written in Iceland, of all places.
Yes, that's the fun thing about it, is that it's also Icelandic. Written in,
it's written
13th
by
century,
like settlers combining not even decades, like centuries of oral tradition and what few transcripts they have of what they had before that. Essentially being written almost divorced of the original mythological belief, and rather just as this like collection of stories. Yeah,
and that's the thing we have to keep revisiting, is that even these things that we call like the truest sources we have still are unable to accurately communicate what Norse mythology was when it was a living tradition. And I really bet listeners are going to be excited to hear me not say the words living tradition every episode going forward. Because that's just the best terminology I have grabbed onto to like communicate the difference between what it is now when we read the Eddas and what it was then when there was someone who's like living it. Okay, so I have to make a confession just real quick. When you're like, here's Odin, he's the Allfather, and you told us all this stuff, it struck me in that moment that I don't think the phrase Allfather appears once in my notes.
You know what? I'm honestly not surprised by that. That feels like a more modern edition as a sort of catch-all term.
No, here's the thing. It's because if you read Snorri, I have where he talks about like in the Gylfaginning, and chapter 3 is the Allfather. Gangleri began to question who is the highest or oldest of all the gods. Hai replied, he is called Allfather in all language, but in Asgard the Old he has 12 names. One is Allfather. A second, so like. No, Allfather is correct. I just somehow did 5 pages of notes on Odin and just didn't write the phrase Allfather. And I just needed to, like, confess that. I couldn't carry the baggage of that sin around. So
I was going to say, I swear it came up in the prose edda, because because after the phrase I used from the Folk's translation, it goes into, he is called the Allfather, for he is the father of all gods.
Yeah. So, like...
What's the phrase?
So no,
and this is
like
why he can be called Allfather, that he is father of all gods and of men and of everything that has been brought into being by him and by his power.
Yeah.
The earth was his daughter and his wife. I just wanted to throw that line in because that line just always irks me.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't know where you're getting that, Snorri, but sit the fuck down. We've done a lot on this season to talk about how the Norse were like, incest? We don't do that here. Like, we invented a whole new family of gods, so we don't have incest like the Greeks. So...
Not in our Christian Minecraft server.
So, yeah, I just needed to just make the confession. But hey, speaking of names that Odin has, he's got 170 of them.
Even that feels like a fairly conservative number.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not gonna recite them all. But that was interesting because because there's not a lot of places named after Odin, unlike like Thor or Tyr or Frey, which I thought was very interesting. Because we've been using that as a metric to communicate like how influential a deity was this season, because that's a big thing. But I don't know, having 170 names for this deity also feels like a good way to communicate this was very important. Had a lot of associations with.
Yeah, and I think that there's also the big one of when you look at like Anglo-Saxon tradition, calling him Woden being widely accepted as the origin for the word Wednesday, Woden's Day.
Yeah, thank you, AJ. I was trying to figure out like how do I fit Wednesday in? Yeah, how do I fit Wednesday in there?
I actually do have a theory about this, but we'll come back to it in a bit because we have to set something else up first.
Oh, okay. But I did actually bring up Woden is. Thank you again, AJ. Wow. Do you want to be my co-host? Because this is usually DJ's job, is to set me up for the good volleys. So, but no. So I did want to touch on that a little bit. Is like how the deity that we identify as, well, we know as Odin in Norse mythology, has an incredibly like long history in the Germanic peoples, and was maybe the most widely known god across Germanic paganism, like not just in Norse belief systems, and like had the names like Woden, and like that stems from like a Proto-Germanic name that kind of meant like Lord of Frenzy. And I just wanted to note that because it's a super important piece of like studying Odin as a figure, but it is not something we are going to dive deep into here because I just don't have we don't have the time, we don't have the bandwidth. That's a lot. That's stretching us pretty thin. We are just going to really hyper focus on the Norse aspect, unless Tim or AJ or DJ has something really specific they want to throw out and talk about, because I think it's really interesting. But like, I just don't want anybody coming at us and be like, why didn't you talk more about this? And I'm like, because I made the executive decision,
because we're not linguistic scholars,
because I'm going to narrow the focus,
and because we'd have to talk about every Germanic culture.
I can't do that here.
Dark Ages Europe, and that's just
not what this season is about. I wanted to acknowledge it because I think it is important and very interesting. But we're going to focus on what's in the Eddas. So we're already going out of order. Do y'all want to talk about why he's got one eye, or we want to talk about his undercover boss hijinks?
Let's start with the eye thing because that relates to what I was to my setup.
Tim, take it away.
So like we were mentioning earlier when he was hanging with the tree, Odin also, I forget the exact instances of it because it's been a while since I read the Edda, but he basically cut out his eye in exchange for all the wisdom he has. But his eye still holds an incredible amount of power. That actually relates to what I was saying before about how what about Odin's prevalence. You mentioned back in your Thor episode that like Thor was everywhere. Like everybody had a big statue of Thor in their house in 900s Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Odin, I think, when you see Odin depicted in popular culture, it's just as often that you see Odin's eye depicted as a source of power than you do actually see Odin himself. Like
interesting.
Like in Gargoyles in particular, you see the Eye of Odin as like a MacGuffin in like 3 or 4 episodes before Odin himself makes his actual appearance.
God, Gargoyles is such a good show.
It is, but unfortunately, Odin doesn't really give me a lot to work with in that. He just kind of is the standard undercover boss in that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so Odin losing an eye. Oh, since Tim brought up Thor, I'm gonna real quick. I'll save that for later. So Odin. Odin's the one we're talking about, not Tim. Tim is here.
We could talk about Tim. We don't have much to talk about when it comes to Tim's eye, but
they seem fine. Tim
they seem like they're doing all right.
So that's good. You getting checked up pretty good, Tim?
I'm actually overdue for an eye exam.
Oh my man, you gotta go check. Gotta watch out for eyes. So, hey DJ,
what's that?
I got a present for you.
What is it?
It's the fact that we finally get to talk about Mimir.
Whoa, the headman.
Yeah, so I'm going to read a verse real quick, and then I'm going to let you tell us about Mimir, because I have woven this episode together to cover a couple of topics, so I don't have to do more work. So in the Seer's Prophecy, in the Volspa, the first reference we get is not the first reference to Odin. Odin talks a bit, but the seeress says, as she's speaking to Odin, alone she sat outside when the old man came, the terrible one of the Aesir. He looked in her eyes. Why do you question me? Why do you test me? I know all about it, Odin, where you hid your eye in Mimir's famous well. Mimir drinks mead every morning from the father of the slain's pledge. Do you want to know more? And what? So, D, who's Mimir?
Mimir? Mimir is, in fact, renowned for his knowledge. He's just... is he an Acer? He's an Acer, isn't he?
And you know what? Maybe.
Yes,
he's one of the Aesir.
I'm just trying to... I don't remember how he only became a fucking head. He's just a head. And he's chilling in a well, and his well holds the secrets to a lot of universes.
Sure.
A lot of people will drink from his well to gain knowledge, but they lose something in return. And I believe that's where Odin gave up his eye.
It is where Odin gave up his eye.
Yep. He's in Jotunheim underneath
Tim and I just said.
Root from the Yggdrasil tree.
That's it.
That's kind of what he's
got,
got,
a lot
right?
of knowledge, and he's got a lot of knowledge, and he's ahead. This is like the one time in the Volspas where he's mentioned, and not just as a head. The other times this dude comes up, and even later in the same poem, right at Ragnarok, the sons of Mim are at play, and the measuring tree is kindled. At the resounding Gillar horn, Heimdall blows loudly, his horn is in the air. Odin speaks with Mim's head, the ancient tree groans, and giants get loose. Yggdrasil shudders, the tree stands upright. And then much in a different poem called The Lay of Sigfrida, we've talked about this like briefly when the hero Sigurd rescues the Valkyrie Sigfrida, who was put to sleep by Odin after she brought down a warrior whom Odin had promised victory to. And so in exchange, Sigurd's like, hey, will you teach me wisdom? And she's like, hell yeah, let me tell you all I know about the runes. And it makes sense for a Valkyrie, one of like Odin's personal like warrior maidens, to know about the runes when it's like Odin himself thing. It's like how they have spears, because that's like an Odin thing. And that's like, I don't know. I like that. I like that the warrior ladies have a lot of like strong association with Odin specifically. While she's talked to him about this, she also recites the poem suddenly becomes about Odin for a second. And this is another example of, hey, scholars are pretty sure these are two different poems that have just been like fusion-had together. Nice. On a cliff he stood with Brimir's sword. What is Brimir? Who is his sword? We have no idea. Moving on. A helmet on his head. Then Mim's head spoke, wisely the first word, and told the true letters, talking about getting the runes. Or using the runes. So, DJ, you said, I don't know how Mimir became just a head. AJ, Tim, do either of you know how Mimir became just a head?
I don't, actually.
If I remember correctly, he's beheaded in the war between the Aesir and the Vanir, and it's because the Vanir believe that he cheated them during a meeting for the truce, I believe.
Yes, kind of. So, here's what we have. The story of what happened to Mimir comes from the Heimskringla, which is, what is it? It's actually one of the King's sagas. And specifically, it's Snorri's King's saga written in 13th century in a subsection of the saga called the Ynglinga saga. And this one tells the story of the Aesir-Vanir war, and there was an exchange of hostages. And so the Aesir sent the Vanir Honir and Mimir. And initially the Vanir are like, great, we'll make this Honir guy our chief, because he's a chief. He seems pretty cool. But then they realize he's actually an idiot without Mimir's guidance. And so they cut off Mimir's head and send it back to the Aesir. And then Odin performs a ritual to preserve Mimir's head, allowing it to still speak and provide guidance to him. Now here's an important detail for just the subject matter of our show. The King's sagas are not part of the Eddas. They are meant to be, yeah. AJ, do you want to explain what the King's sagas are?
It's a bit strange because they're kind of sort of addendums in a loose sense. They weren't part of the original transcripts. They were essentially like written as their own histories of the mythology.
From what I understand, they're kind of like largely meant to be like historical accounts of Scandinavian kings.
Yeah, and a lot of that ended up, especially when Snorri was writing his, they essentially ended up tying back into these foundational myths because it was believed that this was where kings kind of divined their ability to rule.
Yep, this saga is actually the first in the King Saga because it's essentially Snorri euhemerizing the account of the mythology, which is when you take, I'm not sure y'all know this, I'm explaining it for listeners who didn't know, and past Darien who didn't know until she saw this word. It's when you take an account, like a mythological tale, and then you recontextualize it as if it was a real world event.
Oh.
A lot like that version of Freya that apparently Rick Riordan decided he was going to base his version of Freya on is a euhemerized event. And I'm probably mispronouncing that word, but we're just going to move past that. So in this interpretation, like Odin is a sorcerer chief who is worshipped as a god, but is not necessarily actually a god. And when he dies, Njorn takes over, and from his and then Frey's descendants is where the lineage of kings come from. Also, I do keep saying that Snorri wrote it. Yeah, that's not actually a thing we know for sure. Like, we know for sure this man wrote the Prose Edda and hated French poetry. Like, we know that.
Who doesn't? You're not special.
But scholar and translator Anthony Fox actually said on the subject matter, the authorship of the Heimskringla is not referred to within the text or in any surviving manuscript, as usually the case for medieval work, and its attribution to Snorri has been questioned. The first surviving works in which he's credited as the author are 16th century translations of the Heimskringla into Danish. So, again, this is not saying this isn't a useful text or interesting or valuable or things like that, but like in this our specific thing and trying to talk about Mimir, like we lack a critical insight into being able to understand what Mimir's like origin story would have existed in like the Old Norse canon as a living tradition.
And I think to tie it back to Greek, that's kind of a bit of a trend with ancient history anyways, is that we see these histories essentially being written not necessarily in contemporary times, but shortly thereafter. Mm-hmm. Like, most of the king sagas are written about kings from, like, the 8th, 9th century being written in, like, the 12th, 13th centuries.
Yeah, so even the historical accuracy of it is like, who knows?
Yeah, we're all just kind of attributing them to Snorri because we know Snorri was a historian who was actively writing during the time. Much like we attribute a lot of Greek histories we don't know the author to Herodotus, if it's around that time, simply because we know Herodotus is writing and we know, okay, this is close enough, this is around the time he was active, he may have written it, he may not have written it.
But it needs to come from someone.
Yeah, you get to like the 19th century Brits and they're like, well, whatever, it's close enough.
So who cares?
It might be Herodotus, it might not be Herodotus. We don't care. They'll believe anything we say.
But yeah, that's Mimir. He this is a dude. We know he got his head chopped off. Maybe it was in the AC. Maybe something else happened. Who's to say? But that thing Odin mentions about like, I know a rune to bring people back to life. Yeah, that's probably why Mimir can be just ahead. Odin probably did that.
The goat.
But the just circling back to like the Odin sacrificing his eye for the wisdom, I wanted to like spend some time discussing that because I realized as I was writing it down that I think there are two ways someone could reasonably interpret it. And of course, like, it's a poetic way of like framing Odin's wisdom as coming from like an untold hardship and great sacrifice, like a willingness to give up something in exchange for wisdom, that it doesn't come from nowhere. There is cost to gaining knowledge. But I think you could also maybe frame it as like, well, was this just a shortcut? Odin didn't actually have to do all these things, didn't actually have to go through the things that someone else would have to go through to gain knowledge. He just had to cut off his eye. And yeah, that's rough, but like, so is it a shortcut or is it like a bold sacrifice?
I think it's hard not to call it a sacrifice, but I also agree with the sentiment that it is very much a shortcut. Odin is in most depictions shown as being very capable of going out and acquiring the knowledge and understanding what he sacrifices his eye to get the power to do. Essentially by hanging himself from the tree and sacrificing his eye to Mimir's well, which it goes on to say, like, everybody comes to Mimir's well. Many great scholars come, they drink from the well for knowledge, but they have to give up something. Odin essentially just decided to take the biggest ante and give up his eye in return for understanding everything.
Hell
Which is
yeah,
pretty
dude.
bold. I'm not, no, it's pretty bold. I don't have a stance one or the other. I'm more inclined to be like, yeah, it's the poetic symbolism of like hard sacrifice. Like, I don't think it's actually meant to be like, wow, Odin sucks. But I feel like that's what I got to set up for this episode because eventually I'm going to let y'all loose. So we have to do a little bit of groundwork.
I think the big thing that you see in a lot of these stories is more so that what Odin does for Odin. When we get more into the story of Ragnarok, you could argue that what he's doing is trying to receive counsel specifically to help everybody involved. But up until, the end of time, we're looking at an Odin whose main motive is empowering Odin. Yeah. Regardless of whether you can perceive that as noble or not, it does ultimately come from a very selfish place, and I think a lot of modern interpretations of Odin do lean into it being as selfish as you could argue it was in the original text.
That's a point. Hey, did you go on, Tim?
I'm just saying Loki didn't being the god of trickster starts at home.
Tim? Did you have any? AJ, did you have any specific examples of what you're talking about, like Odin going out to acquire knowledge that you want to introduce as we start to transition away from the eye and the runes and into more of the general Odin behaviors and habits?
I think the two examples we made so far have been the largest ones I think really deserve notice, because I think they're also the two that you see as a very common parallel in a lot of other interpretations of him. If we got down into more specific myth, I'm sure I could find another example that probably does better as a self-serving example. But to say that those really had the permanence to shine through in other interpretations of Odin or the way we talk about Odin nowadays would probably be disingenuous to argue, Yeah. Much like we can all talk about the story of Loki transforming himself into a mare, but does it actually influence the way we see Loki, or do we just talk about it because it's a funny myth about one specific story?
It's a pretty funny myth about one specific story about Loki fucking up negotiations so bad that he had to like really overcorrect to fix the problem.
Yeah.
So do we want to talk about Odin's undercover boss obsession?
Yeah, let's do it. Odin loves to just appear to people as...
He loves to play dress up and go out.
And I gotta say, most of his disguises suck.
Do they?
Like, okay, this is obviously saying it with the benefit of being the author, but if I'm in, like, 12th century Norway, and a mysterious old man approaches me and starts saying cryptic things, I don't know what other conclusion I can logically think, but it's like, oh, you're obviously Odin or insane. Yeah. Either way, I don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah? No, I mean, yeah. I went ahead
Was he
and
only
went
ever
through
cryptic old men, though?
Yes. I have a specific example.
Okay.
I went through the Eddic, and I went through and found all of the Eddic poems where Odin disguises himself as. I've got some verses I'd love to share. So, we've got Vafthrundir sayings. And in this poem, Odin sets off against his wife's advice, disguised as a poor wanderer to test his wisdom against the giant Vafthrundir, who is only known in this poem. And this is just a wisdom contest where they go back and forth and be like, I know this, what do you know? I know this, what do you know?
So obviously this is going to go great for Vafthrundir.
Yep. The overall, like, Odin defeats him in this, and it's interpreted as, like, representing that, like, the time of the giants is over. Like, it is now the time of the gods. The next time Odin does this is in the poem Grimnir's Sayings, wherein Odin and Frigg are, like, at odds, where they have, like, picked two, like, such sons of this king to be, like, they're the patrons of. And Frigg's like, hey, the guy you picked sucks. He is terrible to his guests. And Odin's like, no, he's not. I will disguise myself as an old man and go to his house and find out. And then this dude named Geared does mistreat his guest. When Odin arrives at his hall, calling himself Grimnir, the masked one. So he, like, doesn't give him any food, doesn't give him any water, like, traps him in a hot room. And, like, did Frigg maybe go to his place and say, hey, a wizard's gonna come and try to fuck with you, watch out? Yeah, maybe she did do that. But, like, he still tortured this guy he didn't know was Odin. And, yeah. This also has a lot of, like, mythological back and forth of, like, sharing wisdom. It's where we get a lot of, like, our understanding or, like, the facts we have about, like, the Norse cosmology comes from this poem. The next one is called Harbard Song. And it's this one where Odin in disguise and Thor meet at a fjord crossing. Odin refuses to ferry Thor across the water, and the two engage in a ritual exchange of insults. This is a weird poem, just in general. Scholar Carol Clover has suggested that the poem may be intended as a parody of the usual flighting poem. But essentially, like, this ferryman just insults Thor left and right, just dunking on him. Thor loses. He is not able to keep up. Now, fun fact, early scholars thought that the ferryman was Loki, but later scholars are more in favor of identifying him with Odin because, among other things, Odin makes a statement in Grimmir's sayings that is one of his names, or that the ferryman says is one of his names.
More importantly, I think, when Loki fucks with Odin, he wants Odin to know it was him.
That's true. Yeah, like, Loki's never one to... He walks into a party and burns every goddamn bridge. Like, he will eventually... And he eventually took credit for the whole disguising himself as an old woman so Baldur couldn't come back to life thing. So you're right. It probably was... Now, why did Odin do this? I don't know, man. Whatever.
Why does Odin do anything?
Why does Odin do anything?
Because he just likes fucking with people. I get it.
Yeah, pretty much. That is 90% of his motivation. I have another tale in my notes. Let me see if I wrote the name down. I'm using Control F very liberally with my notes today. It was Vafthrud Nismo, which is Vafthrudnir's sayings, where he essentially goes to Jotunheim in disguise and says, "I'm going to challenge you to a contest of knowledge." Mm-hmm. You can see exactly where that went.
Yeah. Why? And then a later poem, which is, these next two aren't actually technically part of, like, the poetic... Like, they are part of the Poetic Edda, but they weren't originally part of the Codex Regius, which is, like, that main translation of the Poetic Eddas. But they're in my copy, so I'm going to cite them. We have Baldur's Dreams. And this is the poem where Baldur is having nightmares that he's going to die, and the Aesir are like, that's weird. Why is that happening? So Odin goes down to hell, finds the ghost of a prophetess, and is like, what's up? Tell me what you know. And Odin ends the conversation by asking for a piece of mythological information which reveal his true identity to the seeress. So I'm including this one because while it's not said that Odin gets dressed up and goes down there in disguise, the fact that his identity is revealed suggests to me that he was in fact concealing himself in some way. And then the last one is the List of Frigg. And this poem, to specifically cite, I've been citing the intros in my copy. And this poem tells of the god Heimdall sets out to create the structures of human society. And in the Poe's intro to the poem, as he went along the seashore somewhere, he came to a household and called himself Frigg. And this poem is about Heimdall sleeping with different, like, human couples and then creating the, like, hierarchy of humanity, which is weird and also not really a Heimdall thing based on other stuff. So a lot of scholars have been like, actually, we think this is Odin. And it's maybe the only place we're in none of the poetic verses say Heimdall. It's only in this prose entry, and that may be just trying to tie into a comment from, like, an earlier poetic or Edda poem. But, like, the behavior and the purpose that, like, Rig, this figure, serves is, like, way more in line with, like, Odin and what he does, and the fact that, like, he literally is said to, like, created humanity out of, like, driftwood. So yeah. I counted that because it gave me 5, which was a nice number.
And I think, thinking about that, kind of going back to how you were talking about it, doesn't explicitly talk about a disguise. There is a certain point where you can almost look at the repetition of certain trends and go, okay, well, this is a motif in Odin's myths. Even if it doesn't specifically say that, it may not have said that because, like you said earlier about the cosmic tree, they didn't say it because concurrent audiences would have understood they're talking about the cosmic tree.
Yeah.
If I tell you Odin asks a question that reveals his identity to the Cirrus, you're immediately going to go, oh, so Odin was in disguise.
Of course.
Because Odin is known to take disguises.
Yeah, and you're like, I was picturing him in a costume this whole time anyway. So yeah, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just right.
I think, to be fair to Odin, oftentimes it seems like he's approaching these people in disguise because he wants to get something from them that I don't think he would typically get if he was approaching them as Odin. Would you, if you thought that you had a good amount of knowledge, would you ever accept a challenge from Odin who gave up his eye for knowledge?
Oh, absolutely not.
No.
And that is actually...
If you treat your guest badly, if Odin showed up and is like, hey, what's good? Are you going to treat fucking Odin badly?
Which is why he went in disguise, to see if
That's why he
he
went in
was
disguise.
actually treating guests. So what were you saying, AJ?
That was also a common interpretation of what he does with Vafthrudnir, where he shows up and challenges the contest of knowledge, because he asks the last question about what Odin's fate will be in Ragnarok. Which then Odin immediately responds by ending the contest by asking a question only Odin knows the answer to.
Yeah.
This punk ass bitch.
So,
Of course, bro.
aside from the interpretation that, yeah, that is a punk ass bitch move,
Oh, come on. It's the what's the identity of Batman?
yeah, there's
that
a very
moment.
common
What's in my
interpretation.
pocket?
Yeah, exactly. And when I was reading it, I went on another website where I was looking for like summaries of certain stories just to kind of add to my notes if there was anything that I could see as a connection. And they specifically pointed it out that it is basically the exact same thing Tolkien did with the Riddle game in The Hobbit.
Oh no, Tolkien
What have I
loved
got
him
in
some
my
letters.
pocket is bullshit.
Oh yeah,
because it's
he
a
absolutely
riddle
ripped
game.
off that story.
It's a
Fucking
riddle game. You're supposed to be a riddle. That's not a riddle. You're asking me what you have in your pocket.
Yeah, well, fucking Smeagol doesn't call him out. He tries to answer it
Yeah.
like it's part of the game. So, like, you do...
Because Smeagol is like
It's
mental. This man is looking for this ring.
Yeah, he's
He is
having a hard
gone.
time.
Like he
He's having a
doesn't
hard
understand
time.
that that's not a
It's
riddle.
not his fault, right? Yeah, it is. Okay, so we say, like, Odin is going to acquire knowledge. But is he? Like, in Vafthrudnir's whole incident, like, is he going to get more information from this giant? Or is he just going to prove he's smarter than this guy?
I think he's
Yeah,
going to prove
because
smarter.
by definition, with what he got from Mimir, I think he literally cannot acquire more knowledge than he already has.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
and that's basically two dueling interpretations. Is this like, was he doing this just to be an asshole, or was he doing this to like confirm what he already knew, to see if everybody else already knew?
But if you're omniscient, then you would know that.
And my answer is, it's both.
it could be both.
Well, you don't know what you don't know.
Frigg being like, he can be like, I'm gonna go.
But
look for the
by
giant. And Frigg being
definition,
like,
if you're
no.
omniscient, you do.
Odin testing to see if he's truly omniscient.
But
I don't know.
if you were omniscient, you wouldn't have to test it.
I mean,
You don't know.
Odin-
That
Stop
could
listening
be-
to his own tail.
Odin is omniscient.
That could be because, I don't know, the chronology of the Edda gets kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
And it's entirely possible that because Odin knew how he died before he hung himself from the cosmic tree. So it's entirely possible that that story takes place before he was omniscient and just got shifted around in the way they were combined
Also,
in the Eddas.
I mean, he hung himself
Yeah.
from the cosmic tree solely to get the understanding of runes, not really the understanding of everything. And I know that's like the runes are everything, quote unquote, but it's not exactly. It's like I have an encyclopedia, like we have Wikipedia at our fingertips. Does that mean that I've read it all?
I do think
That's fair.
it is.
That's a fair point.
I do like having that it's like two separate incidents of like one is the runes specifically and one is like the wisdom. And maybe the wisdom came first and he's like, all right, if I want to learn the runes, this is what I gotta do.
Yeah, I think it's more the combination of those two things that make him the all-knowing figure that we perceive him as.
Yeah. It's also interesting because like it's in like the Volspa, this like prophetess who's like telling us all these things that are about Ragnarok and everything else. She's speaking to Odin. And just like in Baldur's Dream, where he goes down and speaks to the Seeress again, it's like that's also a thing where he's like going to talk to someone about the stuff. And is this also Odin gaining the knowledge, or did he already? Because she says, like, I already know you lost your eye to Mimir in the well. Like, I already know this is what happened. So it's like, what are you seeking to gain from this interaction, Odin? And is this just for the sake of the audience?
I think that, I think making the comment of it being for the audience, I just paused for a second because I went, did we just do the exact same thing? Because earlier how you were talking about, I'm pretty sure you guys know this, but I'm explaining it for the audience in case they don't.
Yeah, I have to do this for the audience. We're a show. We're not. If we were just having a conversation, I wouldn't have to do this because I know you know. But my listener might not know, and I want them to be able to get the full understanding of what we're talking about, not have to like go to Google right now. I already did that for
The
you.
big takeaway of today is Norse myth breaks the fourth wall.
Norse myth does in fact break the fourth wall. This is true.
Yeah.
Now I want to do one more swing into another topic. So in 4 of the 5 Eddas, it is Odin playing Undercover Boss, specifically to like acquire knowledge or just show off the fact that he has knowledge. And in 4 of those 2, Odin is doing so at like specifically going against his wife's good advice. So this felt like a great time to talk about Frigg. Hey y'all, what do we know about Odin's wife?
She's Odin's wife.
Yeah, that's kind of it. They don't really give her much to work with. At least Snorri didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very fair because there isn't a lot of surviving information about her. So I can only imagine if there's not a lot now, and what we have is basically the Eddas. How much did they have to go off of? Because I know that we have like the Historia Langobardium, but how much can we trust an 8th century account of that's basically a derivation of a 7th century text about myths from like the 3rd century?
Exactly. We can't.
Even getting into the we talked about how the Eddas can be perceived as unreliable, but the Historia Langobardium is a nightmare. It would be like me passing Dynasty Warriors off as legitimate Chinese history. It's a video game adaptation of a novel that is a romanticized interpretation of myth based on loose historical record.
Yeah.
I can only call that so accurate.
Yep. As you all said, like, you are spot on. There's a reason that like Frigg got folded in because like there isn't a lot about her. Much like I think beyond Freya, there's not a lot on the goddesses. Frigg is mentioned 3 times in the Volspa, and it's all in reference to Ragnarok and the deaths of Balder, her son, or Odin, her husband. A real quick aside, in the last episode, I was like, wait, hold on. I'm actually not sure if Thor's mom is Frigg. It's not. Thor's mom is a goddess named Diord, which is derived from a Pro-Germanic word for earth. And Snorri sang her among the Aesir. And all we know about her is because one time Thor is called the son of Diord.
And I just gotta call this out. You'd think that wouldn't be the case with a society that was as documentedly matrilineal as Norse society was.
Yeah, it's kind of odd.
I also could have pointed that out in the folk section I read earlier. The section because it does say how I mentioned the line, the earth is his daughter and his wife. Section was setting up that Thor is the son of Odin and the earth.
Like, really, Hel is the most prominent goddess that we have the most concrete information on in this pantheon.
Yeah, and even but that also might be because she may be a poetic invention from later bards, just personifying hell and death.
Yeah. And
not necessarily being a worshipped goddess of this pantheon at the time, when it was a living tradition, you understand. I've already talked about how in Vafthrundir sayings, Frigg is like, don't go bother the giant. And in Grimnir sayings, she is like, hey, your favorite king actually sucks. And then another time she is also present in Loki's quarrel, that feast where Loki burns every single bridge. And I think read those verses so many
Loki
times over the
crashes
course
out,
of the
bro.
season.
That's ridiculous.
Crashes
I cannot believe
out
he did that.
hard. This isn't Loki's episode. We're done with him. Snorri describes
I mean, you
Frigg.
say that, but we're never done with Loki.
We're never done with Loki. Snorri describes Frigg as being the foremost of the goddesses. And he also is the one that gives us the full account of Baldur's tale and Frigg's efforts to protect her son, which is where we get like the most Frigg being, I mean, pretty proactive. I mean, nagging wife isn't great characterization for being a proactive character, but
it's not the worst.
So Frigg's name is associated with a Proto-Germanic noun, which meant free, and related to another word which meant to love, both of which stemmed from a Proto-Indo-European word meaning one's own or beloved, which strongly indicates Frigg's role as a goddess of marriage and motherhood. And yes, the name Friday comes from Frigg's Day.
Mm-hmm.
Good
And
for
I
her.
like that. I didn't know that.
But-
That made me happy.
Good for her.
Yeah, the difficult thing is like you said, a nagging wife isn't much of a characterization. And even going back to her name, being married and being a mother is nearly Frigg's entire purpose for existing.
It is. It is. I think with her, in the case where she's like, was right to be like, hey, Odin, this guy's no good. And he's like the goddess of wisdom, and her being correct in her assessment against Odin, I like to interpret as indicating that she is also very wise. But again, it is just maybe I guess I don't know if it was a trope back in the time, but it does just kind of read as the wife's always going to disagree with the husband.
That might be part of it. I do know
Boomer
that in some
humor.
texts 8th century boomer humor. Don't you love it? I do know that in some text, Frigg is also treated like a god of clairvoyance, almost.
Yes. Yeah.
Like she is treated like the matron of prophecy, essentially.
Yep. Excellent.
And
Excellent.
she is often seen with Odin looking into the worlds. Like she does have some capacity of his wisdom, but that's more in the sense that he is sharing it to his wife.
Mm-hmm. Hey, regarding Frigg is like associated with like prophecy and clairvoyance. I couldn't figure out why that was.
Neither could I.
Because I was like, yeah, prophecy, because she knew Baldur was going to die and tried to protect him. Well, they knew Baldur was going to die because Baldur was having dreams about it. That's not Frigg having prophecy. Like, I couldn't find anywhere in the Eddas, in the Poetic Edda, or in Snorri's text, in which Frigg
it's
herself,
nowhere in the prose edda.
And it's cited a lot. And I was trying to find any like scholarly journal or text examining it. And the best I could find is like maybe it has something to do with her possible connection to Freya. Because we've talked about like Freya having an association with magic and foresight. Specifically in this figure that was maybe also her during the Vanir-Aesir War, who was killed by the Aesir and then brought back. So they're both associated with weaving and goddesses of love and domesticity, but like that's not super uncommon. But there is an idea that like maybe Frigg and Freya were once a single goddess that split over time. Not that these two like Frigg and Freya are not the same, but once upon a time were and became two separate goddesses in the tellings. There's some argument it's like their names are etymologically similar, except what I found they're actually not. But there is a similarity etymologically between Freya's missing husband, Odor, and Odin. And not just because they sound alike, but because like you go back in etymology. I'm not fucking Jacob Grimm here. I'm actually doing the legwork beyond they sound alike. And so there's this kind of like, and there's a whole like, this is like a big hypothesis. This, again, it's a hypothesis. It's a theory. This isn't necessarily me saying this is the actual origin and why it is. But I found it interesting. And scholar Stefan Grundy stated, the problem of whether Frigg or Freya may have originally been a single goddess is a difficult one, made more so by the scantiness of pre-Viking Age references to Germanic goddesses and the diverse quality of the sources. So as y'all said earlier, we don't have a lot to go on to begin with. We don't have a lot about the goddesses to begin with, so it's hard to tell and track this lineage of whether or not these two figures were one. The same way we can kind of track, yes, Odin definitely was this figure and this guy and this one over here and this, like, the evolution culturally.
Yeah. And it's I think it's even more prominent with Norse mythology is that there are a lot of gods that we ask, are these two supposed to be the same figure that are getting different names because of, different transcriptions or different dialects or whatever have you about
or like
why
just
exactly
meanings and stuff like that. Like
Yeah,
they're being called
exactly.
things. Yeah. And it's a lot of that. It's a lot of that. I feel like I didn't spend a lot of time like investigating over the course of this season. But I also think that's really interesting. It just ties back into a lot of people like to get mad at adaptations of Greek mythology and like, okay, I don't think anyone's allowed to get mad at an adaptation of Norse mythology for these reasons entirely. We don't have it, gang. These poems are an adaptation of an idea. You get to do
exactly. Like when you get into interpretations of Greek myth contemporarily, then you get into a whole thing about okay, these sources interpreted this god this way, these sources interpreted entirely differently, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. You also
the
have
Norse, different sources interpret them differently because they had different manuscripts available to them. Which are more correct? We don't know.
And what does it mean to be correct in the time it's written down after Christianity had become all the rage?
Yeah, we're working with like the writings of a Catholic priest in 9th century Germany and treating that like the authoritative source on a religion that started, 6 centuries before him.
Mm-hmm. One last thing I wanted to talk about, because it delighted me to realize in my research, is that, hey y'all, Odin has a lot of pets.
He does.
So many pets.
So many pets! DJ, do you want to try to name some of Odin's pets?
Hugin and Moonin.
Nice. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, those are the big ones. I actually don't know.
Jormungandr. Fenrir.
No, I won't.
This bro's the All Father. He's the All Father, bro. Father of all.
That's cheating. That's cheating.
All right. Tim has already tapped out, I think, on Hugin and Munin. AJ, you got anybody else?
He has the wolves.
He does have the wolves.
I don't remember if they're considered his, but it's Gary and Freki, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it mentions that he passes the food from his plate to them. I don't remember if they're actually considered his pets or not.
I'm deciding to count them as his pets. Because, in Grimnir's sayings, it says that he feeds them from the table of Valhalla while he himself is drinking only wine.
Yeah, because he, as, Odin does not require food or drink. He just drinks to drink.
Me cutting up a slice of my steak for cash.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So the wolves' names are Giri and Freki. And in the first slay of Helgi Hungingsbane, it's stated that these wolves prowl the battlefield. The peace of the Fjordi was torn between the enemies. Corpse eager on the island ran Odin's hounds. Both their names roughly translate to something akin to greedy one or ravenous, which is terrifying for wolves. DJ, do you have any thoughts on wolves?
They were a problem.
I think they're misunderstood.
They're just misunderstood.
They're just big dogs.
They were not misunderstood. Wolves were
Forget the fact that they were tearing
problem.
gods apart during Ragnarok.
They were tearing people apart, dude. When they were telling these stories, people were talking about it, saying, yeah, they were a problem.
What murder?
Okay, maybe it's rude. I'm accounting as a pet. The 8-legged horse Sleipnir.
I guess technically.
Because I like Odin having lots of animal friends.
I don't know if people call horses their pets, though. I think they just say, yeah, I got a horse.
Whatever, it's an animal friend. I like Odin having a lot of animal friends. I don't think we see that. It's always the ravens, never the wolves or the horse. Odin is a horse girl, confirmed.
I always hear about Sleipnir. I love the 8-legged horse.
We hear about him. How often does he appear? It's way easier to do the ravens, who are sent all over Midgard to bring Odin back information.
In the right areas. He appears in Magnus Chase, Darien. Or
he
Stanley
doesn't.
does. Stanley
Yeah,
appears,
so not actually
and that's a kid
Sleipnir.
of Sleipnir.
Yeah, and that's weird.
That's the same kind of shit that you'd expect from Rick Riordan's writings.
Yeah, I was about to say that. It's the same shit he pulled with Pegasus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like here's the difference though. There's not a bunch of 8-legged horses running around. Like, it's not like they're all over Valhalla, like the Pegasi are all over Camp Half-Blood.
It's literally just the one.
It's just the one. Why couldn't it have just been Sleipnir? And it's
Would it
summoned
have really
by
been
Hearthstone.
that hard?
No, and it would have been cool because the horse shows up because like Hearthstone does like a magic rune thing to summon a ride, like help. It would have been way more impressive for it just to be Sleipnir. Like, Stanley doesn't show back up in other books. This isn't like, it was weird. It was weird in another example of like, okay, I can't get in on this now. It's the end of the season. We're going to finish on a positive note. So, the Ravens. Hey, y'all. What do the Ravens' names mean? Watch out, it's a trap.
Hugin is thought, Moon is memory.
Interesting. Anybody else?
I believe both of their names are plays on the word for memory, aren't they?
Kind of.
I actually literally don't know.
I was going to say,
I
I
just
think I
always heard
remember
it as
reading
thought
that
and
somewhere
memory.
when I was doing research, is that even thought was supposed to ultimately play into both of them being like embodiments of Odin's wisdom in some way.
Yes. So Hugin is essentially a noun and Munin is a verb for kind of the same concept. So it's often thought and memory, but it's more akin to mind and will.
Okay, that makes sense.
And you could also even like arguably, if you wanted to get like kind of esoteric's not the right word, but I like the sound of it, so I'm going to use it. You could do like comprehension and wonder. Like, these ravens are meant to communicate something more ethereal about Odin's nature beyond, thought and mind. I think, like, mind or thought and memory. Like, mind and will are a little bit more intangible. Comprehension and wonder. Like, I don't know. It's grander than I think adaptations have allowed it to be.
Yeah, that's fair. Anytime I think about Moon, I think of a manhwa that we'll get into.
Oh, okay. Let's get into it. That's it. That's all I got. I wanted to finish it talking about all of Odin's animal friends.
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
there are so many more things that we could talk about regarding Odin. He's a big thing. I think this is important. Here's actually the thing. Regarding this Loki episode, I walked away not feeling super jazzed about the episode because I feel like I hadn't done enough research-wise for it. And I realized I was putting a lot of pressure on myself and I forgot like kind of what I want the episodes in the podcast to be. These are never meant to be a fully comprehensive resource about whatever the given topic is. They're supposed to be a sampler plates. Like, here's some fun stuff. Isn't this interesting? And if anyone is like, that was really cool, hopefully it inspires and springboards them into diving deeper and digging more and doing more research and exploring these things. Like, this is an entryway, but it can never be like a truly, like, ultimately final say comprehensive 6-week lecture.
Exactly.
So I gave myself permission not to go into everything on Odin and let myself have a thing called Odin has a lot of pets. Let's talk about it.
So valid.
Okay, so we are now, I believe, entering the space where Tim and AJ are going to tell us why they have beef with Odin.
Well, before we get to that, there's other Odin in pop culture, and we'll do that first because I think it's going to take a while.
That's
Honestly,
what I was thinking.
I feel like I should also preface this by saying that I have a lot less shit to talk about the real Odin compared to the way he's perceived by literally everybody in pop culture.
See, that's so funny because when I was starting a thing and Tim was like, AJ and I want to talk shit about Odin. I was like, shit, Odin must suck. And then as we've done the whole season, I'm like, actually, I think I kind of like Odin. Like, in a way that's really easy to dislike, like Zeus. Like, really easy to dislike Zeus. I'm kind of like, I kind of like Odin. I think he's a fun guy.
No,
that's one of my
realized.
biggest complaints with Odin. Every time you talk about Odin being a jackass, somebody comes up and goes, but he's not as bad as Zeus. Of course he's not as bad as Zeus.
Yeah, there's a reason we
That's a very high bar.
He's
It's a low bar, it's in
bad.
hell.
He's differently bad than Zeus. Zeus is a typical dude, bro. Odin is terminal. Odin is terminally online.
Wait,
Yeah.
wait, okay,
Yeah.
hold up. Zeus is a rapist, so let's not beat the bar on the bush there.
That's
my
what I said.
knowledge.
That's why I said he's a dude, bro.
There's a reason we didn't change the sign-off of the show when we switched from Greek mythology. Like, don't be like, oh, Loki. Sometimes you gotta be like Loki. I don't know what to tell you. You never
Loki
have to
does
be like
plenty
Zeus,
of good
though.
things.
Like, Loki cleans
He's
up
kind
his
of a
business.
jerk, but he does plenty of good things.
So, DJ, do you want to talk about SMITE?
Mightiest of the Aesir, warrior and king, the All-Father is a doomed god. It seems strange to imagine a god concerned with his fate, but Odin regularly consults the Volva, the seers in the north. They speak of a final war, Ragnarok, when the mightiest gods are slain and the world is consumed by the sea. For this day, Odin constantly prepares. The All-Father can trace his lineage to the evil frost giant Ymir, whom he slew with the aid of his two brothers, Vili and Ve, and with his remains forged the world. Atop Asgard, where Odin presides, he is known as the bringer of war, a sage of wisdom, and the keeper of souls slain in battle. As a warrior, Odin rides his eight-legged steed Sleipnir and wields the mighty spear Gungnir. Accompanying him are two wolves and his two ravens, Hugin, Thought, and Munin, Memory, who fly around Midgard and return to Odin with all they see and hear. As a sage, Odin travels disguised as a simple wanderer seeking wisdom. His thirst for knowledge has come at great personal cost, having been hanged from the branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and nights, and sacrificed one of his eyes to the well of wisdom. As keeper of souls, Odin welcomes slain warriors to his mighty hall of Valhalla on the agreement they will aid him at Ragnarok. Favored female warriors become his elite Valkyrie that usher those worthy of entry to Valhalla. It is in preparation for the final days of Ragnarok he does all this. For the seers claim his death will come at the fangs of the great wolf Fenrir, and like anyone, Odin seeks to change his fate. Yet never once have the Volva been mistaken.
So DJ, in game, what role is Odin?
He's there's no more roles, but he's a solo laner.
What does that mean?
Well, he's by himself. He's in a lane.
He takes his lane alone, and the jungler comes to help him if he ever gets back
on
up.
again.
I do not understand this game.
5
years in, still don't get it.
I have SMITE 2 open right now because I've been looking at a lot of shit. Just perusing, looking at. They have progression, like mastery progressions for each god, and they're where like it's like a thing that goes up, and sometimes it's just like a firework, but other times it's like a photo, and they have them for like all gods, and they're all like memes or references. Aladdin, who's new, his is a JoJo reference.
I'm sorry, Aladdin is in SMITE?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, I suppose
Aladdin
after
from
King
1001
Arthur.
Nights?
Yeah.
King Arthur did kind of bust the door open for
Mulan busted the door
mythological
open.
figures.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I actually love that a lot. That's very fun.
I would say Mulan, I think, was probably the first hero
Oh, yeah.
in SMITE. That's like technically not really a god, but a fabled figure.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then if we want to get really technical, we can go back to Guan Yu being a god.
Yeah, true, yeah.
Because he's not technically a god. We just call him God of War, and it's a whole thing.
You know.
We can't get into that now. I want to talk
No.
about Thor.
Oh, wait till Rick Riordan writes a series about Chinese mythology. I'm going to be on that Guan Yu episode.
He won't. That's what Riordan presents as an actual Chinese author or an author of the Chinese diaspora gets to write the Chinese mythology one.
Good. Well, if we ever do a Guan Yu episode, I'm there.
Okay.
That's what's gonna happen to Rick when he dies. He gets inserted into the Chinese celestial bureaucracy.
Yeah. That's so funny. Just some white guy.
Hell yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I want to talk about Thor. Specifically, I want to talk about the Mighty Thor. Specifically, I want to talk about Jane Foster's time as the Mighty Thor.
Please do.
Specifically, I want to talk about the time
Speaking of which, we are getting ready to do another episode of these Fast New Realities. That is going to be soon.
Hey!
Whoa!
When Jane Foster had Mjolnir and was the Mighty Thor in the comics, it was awesome. It was way better than what Thor Love and Thunder did, but I digress. And Odin was pretty pissed that some woman was running around with his son's hammer. So the first time he confronts her, he just keeps calling her thief, and she hits him in the face so hard he flies through a wall in his palace at Asgard. And he says, "Today death comes for the would-be Thor." And she responds, "Today my hammer comes for your face."
Nice.
That's a
And
very
they-
Jane Foster line.
Absolutely
So
iconic.
good. And they get in this incredible fight that takes them to the moons of Saturn. Asgard is not anywhere near Saturn. And there's this wonderful one. I love the panel layout on these, and I'm just going to read Jane's internal monologue as they are fighting. There was a time I was in love with the god who once carried this hammer, and he was in love with me. We came awfully close to spending our lives together. There was only one reason we never did. His name is Odin. I was never good enough for the Allfather, never worthy. A lot has changed since those days. So tell me, old man, am I worthy enough for you now? As she picks up a goddamn meteor and slams it down on him.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah, it's super great. It's Odin, right? Like, Jane Foster as Thor is incredibly powerful, but it is still Odin, and they are very heavily matched. Like, at one point in time, they get to Jupiter and ignite the red spot on Jupiter, and it just, like, plasma bursts out into the solar system. And they're gonna kill each other. And the only reason the fighting stops is because Loki stabs Freya. And he does that specifically to get them because he knows it's the one thing that will get them to stop fighting. So he stabs her. Because later on, we get a scene with him sitting beside her as she's like recovering. And he's like, please, this means nothing. If you actually die, you're not supposed to die. So like, defense for Loki, my Loki agent of Asgard boy who I love. But also, yeah, fuck Odin, I guess. That's the one Odin pop culture thing I wanted to bring to the table this episode was like,
yeah, pop culture Odin is a douchebag.
Pop culture Odin is a douchebag. And I loved watching Jane Foster beat his ass.
Pop culture Odin is a douchebag because they take his character traits to a logical conclusion, but we'll get to that in a bit.
Okay.
You know, I'm suddenly realizing that they let us punch pop culture Odin a lot more than I think.
They do, yeah.
Hell yeah.
This is good. He deserves it.
This is also true.
I don't got anything else pop culture-wise for Odin. Again, I'm not bringing anything aside. I was gonna talk about American Gods, but fuck Neil Gaiman.
Fuck Neil.
Yeah, I don't even want to touch that one with a 30-foot pole.
Okay, so there were two Odins I put in the show notes that represent the different extremes of how Odin is represented. So, on the one end of what I think is the best Odin I've seen is Odin in Order of the Stick. Order of the Stick is a webcomic that started as a pretty typical D&D parody comic, but evolved into what is essentially a modern-day Greek epic.
Oh, I love that.
This comic has been going for 21 years straight, and it's still not done. And it has some of the best writing I've ever seen, and I love it, and I absolutely recommend it, but I can't get into that right now. What we're here talking about is how the strip portrays Odin. So, so in the comic, Durkan is the party's cleric, a dwarf cleric, and he's a worshiper of Thor. So, for most of the comic, how we see Odin is in response to, sometimes they'll make jokes about how when you play a cleric in D&D, when you really think about it, you're usually asking your god for really weird and stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
So we usually see Odin in that context. Like, we'll cut to what's going on in Valhalla, and like Thor's getting a prayer, and Odin's there, and we usually see him for most of the comic. He kind of acts like a goofy grandpa.
Nice.
Like, a paladin sends his mount to the celestial realm, and Odin's like, "Ooh, doggy!" And Thor's like, "Dad, don't touch it, you don't know where it's been." And then, eventually, we meet Odin in person, and suddenly those earlier strips aren't as funny anymore.
Oh.
Because, so in this setting, gods are shaped as much by how mortals believe in them as much as what the gods command their, like, tends to be. Like, at one point, Thor makes a joke, "Yeah, I used to be a ginger until that superhero comic came out."
Nice.
So when we meet Odin, he's kind of out of it. Like, he's not quite sure what's going on, and he doesn't remember prophecies he's made, and Thor's like, "No, Dad, you did do this. Like, you made this prophecy so that Durkan would be in this place at this time," and Odin's like, "Oh, if you say so, son, I trust you."
Oh.
And so we learned that in the previous world the gods made, the worshippers of the Norse pantheon were barbarians who thought magic was stupid.
Oh.
Excuse me. And because Odin is a god of magic, that's not good for him.
No.
So Odin, as we see it for most of the comic, has brain damage.
Oh.
That's so sad.
Yeah, and Thor's like, yeah, he'll be okay with a few more centuries of proper worship, but until then he has his good days and his bad days.
That's really sad.
It is.
He dropped that like a bomb on me out of nowhere in an unrelated conversation we had a couple of days ago, and I did not know it was that sad until he explained it all. He just said, oh yeah, that's because that Odin has brain damage.
Timothy.
And there was a long pause and I just went, oh, I guess that makes sense.
What am I supposed to say to that?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Thor's going on about stuff that's like the potential end of the world, and Odin's just like, mortal, I just find it. My hands are hand-sized. And it's like, I can't be mad at you, but fuck, dude.
Damn. Before we swing to the, you said this was like the one, and then the other one's like the opposite end of the spectrum. Before we get to that, DJ, did you want to talk about the other Odin version that we see in a webcomic?
Yeah, so there's two. One of them is still ongoing, and I'm not caught up on it. The other one's Tomb Raider King. I've talked about it before.
Uh-huh.
Somewhere, I know I have. Because it involves like quote-unquote relics that are representations of like the gods of different pantheons or items in like stories, just things, right? Odin does show up, so does like everybody pretty much, but a lot of them are passing, and it's just kind of like a small arc because right now the main character is trying to free Munin, who has been helping him by extending some of her power out there. It's insane. Odin shows up and he recognizes that the main character is using Gungnir.
Oh, yeah.
Recognizes and like feels that Munin's been helping this fella, and obviously not super stoked about that, so starts trying to get all of his stuff back. So he summons Sleipnir, but our main character manages to take control over Sleipnir when he summons it. And so he just like keeps taking shit from Odin. It's a lot of fun. Odin's we don't get really much of him. He essentially loses to the main character. The main character's like, great, I got all these cool relics now, and puts them in storage.
Nice. Okay. Odin's just like, that's my stuff.
Not anymore.
The other one's called I obtained a mythic item, or mythic item obtained, depending on the translation you go with. And this is the one that I'm not caught up on, but I just saw a picture that he does show up. So that's cool. But this one it's one of those hunter ones, you know? I don't know, maybe you don't. But it's like portals start showing up, humans get powers, right?
Okay.
And this guy, at the end of his life, he finds a mythic item, and it's Odin's eye. The eye that Odin gave up.
Odin's eye!
There it is.
And that allows him, like, he dies right then, and it allows him to revert back in time before a bunch of shit went down, so he could actually change it.
Nice.
It's a lot of fun. It's really cool. Nice. The Aesir are kind of jackasses in that one.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
I'm excited to see where that one goes. I just need to pick it back up again.
Hey, Tim, is your next one the one that you and AJ really, really hate Odin in?
Yes, it is. So this is the other extreme of Odin. So this is Odin in the Warcraft universe.
Oh!
He's such a bitch!
Now, if you're a standby Patreon, this is not going to go on for 3 hours, but this is important, and we need you to know how much this guy fucking sucks.
I do not... Tim, I think that's my one complaint with when we did that Patreon episode, is I think we didn't dedicate enough time to how much of an asshole Odin is.
I mean, we didn't intentionally because we knew we were going to do it now, and I need as many people as possible to hear this. I don't want to limit to our patrons.
This is true. I do also enjoy getting paid to talk about how much Odin is an asshole.
That's true.
He has a Y instead of the I, in case you know what kind of level of assholery we're already dealing with.
Wow, I fucking hate that. Fuck this guy.
Yeah, he's terrible. He's the worst.
Okay, so Odin in Warcraft is not a capital G god, he's a lowercase g god.
Okay.
In that he's what's known as a Titan Keeper, which is basically what in most settings you would consider a demigod, but compared to mortals, still really damn powerful.
Okay.
Yeah, as in, like, most of the Titan Keepers are worshipped by gods by mortal races, and Odin, importantly, is worshipped by a god by the Vrykul, which are essentially just Warcraft's version of Vikings.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much. So, when Azeroth was young, the Titans sent their Titan Keepers to Azeroth to rid them of the old gods, and Odin
As you
was the leader of those Titan Keepers. So they did it, and everything worked out great. And then some time goes by, and some stuff happens in Warcraft that we can't get into. And so the Titans say, "Hey, these dragons are really cool. We're going to empower 5 of them, and they're going to be the dragon aspects, and they're going to be the protectors of this world." And Odin is like, "Wait, we were the protectors of this world. I'm not. They took our germs!"
Oh no!
Yeah. Yeah, that is literally Odin's take on it, is that they should not empower the dragons and instead bring them all under control, because dragons couldn't be trusted. Only those
Yikes.
forged of the Titans could be trusted to defend the planet.
Oh no, Odin!
Huge.
No, so cringe!
So in response, Odin takes about half of the facility Udawar, and he raises it into the sky, and it becomes the Halls of Valor, which is basically Valhalla.
Okay.
Okay.
And so from there, he starts doing the typical Odin stuff, like he cuts out his eye, he has his raven companions, and he starts getting, I want to start making Valkyries, which they call Valkyr.
Yep.
So he goes to their version of Hell, which they call Helia. He's like, "Hey, you're going to be the first of my Valkyr, and you're going to guide righteous souls to me that have died gloriously in battle." And Helia's like, "No, I'm not really into that."
No, thank you.
I think we could also get into everything about sacrificing his eye, because that becomes a major plot point in one of the worst expansions, which means Odin caused us way more trouble than he's worth.
We will get to that.
But yeah, Helia is one of the other Titan forged, and the reason Odin forms the Halls of Valor, essentially, is that he wants to create his own private army to enforce his will and defend the planet as he sees fit. So when he tells Helia that, Helia goes, "Maybe we shouldn't do that, because the planet's doing alright, and I don't think we really need to, like, abduct souls to defend the planet."
Good point.
But Odin's like, "I'm in charge of the Titan Forged, so screw you," and transforms her against her will. And told her to do it anyways.
Yeah, not cool, man.
And then he went on, because here's a thing we only found out really recently, but makes perfect sense, and also I talk about it all the time because this is like one of my favorite plot points in modern Warcraft lore. Odin has gaslit all of creation into believing his version of events, basically.
Yikes.
Yeah.
No,
it's not nice. It fucking sucks.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
dude.
aggressively sarcastic. Nice.
Like, he has, like, there's this book that we found relatively recently called The Edicts of the Prime Designate, and Odin is the Prime Designate of the Titans, or was at the time of of its writing. Where he says, yeah, essentially we're keeping like half of the universe a secret to mortals and to everybody that isn't Titan Forged, because their puny, tiny little minds couldn't possibly comprehend it, and if they did comprehend it, they might start questioning the Titans.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Interesting.
Sick.
And then essentially goes, "If you disagree with me, I will fuck you up and tell everybody it was your fault." Which is exactly what he did to Helia, because he then went on to convince everybody that Helia got transformed into a Valkyr because she got too arrogant for her own good.
That's so fucked up.
Yeah,
It is incredibly fucked up.
And so after that, Helia comes more into the role of Hela as we traditionally know her, but that's a story for another time. So
Also, she's like one of the very few justified villains in Warcraft.
she really
lore.
is.
Yeah.
Like, she gets into some evil powers, not gonna deny that. But at the same time, she only got exposed to those powers because Odin decided to turn her into those powers.
This is Odin's fault.
Yes.
It is 100% Odin's fault. So, as the player, we first meet Odin during the Legion expansion, and Legion has this thing where it has a main campaign, and depending on your player class, it had a separate campaign just for that. So Odin was central to the campaign for warriors, and I made a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
So, how it starts is, you go to this place where at the beginning of the expansion, you try all the factions were staging a major assault, and everyone died. So naturally, you go back there again.
Of course.
And you, as the PC, die.
Whoa.
Yeah. So one of the Valkyr raises you and says, "Rise, warrior, it's not your time yet." And she brings you into the halls of Valor. And from there, Odin says, "Oh, champion, you are the greatest warrior on Azeroth. You shall lead the Valajar in my name."
Okay.
And so, when you're first playing this in 2016 and you don't know anything else, I am the best warrior in Azeroth. This is awesome. And then you start playing the campaign and realize how much this guy fucking sucks.
I only started it a couple of weeks ago, and Tim specifically told me when I started it, "Oh, great, you'll get to see what I'm talking about." And yeah, the campaign, like, if he wasn't already a jerk from what you see in the main campaign and everything we find out about him later, oh my god, he almost entirely makes the whole thing about him.
Yeah, so I don't like to get into content that didn't make it to live, but in the beta, the warrior campaign was like, you were going through time recruiting the best warriors from Azeroth's history. Every dead warrior that had a name, you were bringing them into the Halls of Power, and you were bringing them and their strength to fight the Legion. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
Which is, it's supposed to be akin to what Odin does with souls in Valhalla.
Yeah.
That's not what made it to live.
No.
What made it to live?
What made it to live is you essentially go around gathering a bunch of the Titan Forge, like Warcraft's equivalent of Thor, Thorm. He had existed well before Odin, and you spend a lot of time on him. And it's like, I mean, fine, but I don't care as much about Odin as I do about Varian or about Cairn, and like,
two of whom are important world leaders and warriors in Warcraft history. Both of whom had died relatively recently at the time of Legion. Like, Varian had died at the beginning of Legion.
And like, you're sending me to find off these random Vrykul artifacts, which I'm sure are important to you, but they're not as important as the fucking Axe of Cenarius!
Huh.
A legendary weapon which was used in the First War against the Legion to almost kill Sargeras, who commands the Legion.
Yeah, well, why would you want to go for a weapon that almost killed the big bad of this expansion?
So they did a bad version of this. This is what you mean by it's like the worst expansion?
No. Legion expansion is
great.
good, but the Warrior campaign is the worst version of it.
And it's entirely because Odin has entirely hijacked it.
And then in the normal campaign, one of the zones, Stormheim, is all about the Vrykul. And through it, you're meeting this guy named Javi, who, if you have an ounce of media literacy, you can peg, okay, you're clearly Odin in disguise.
He is followed around by a gigantic raven called Hunan for most of the story.
Yeah.
Oh my god, so not even kind of subtle.
No, not at all.
No, it's very clearly Odin.
Like, you're supposed to know?
If you're like me, and you finish the Warrior campaign before you did the main campaign, once you get to the end of the main campaign, and Javi reveals himself as Odin, he's like, "Oh, excuse me, Battle Lord. My deception was necessary. You knew who I was this entire time, and you made me go through all that bullshit."
Because, for the record, the Stormheim campaign, the plot...
Fucker!
Yeah, basically. Because the Stormheim campaign is basically Javi telling you, you have to prove yourself to Odin. You have to prove yourself to Odin to gain his power. And then you get to the end and goes, psych bitch, I was Odin the whole time. Now you gotta prove yourself to me again.
You cocksucker.
That's so fucking funny.
Oh no!
Yeah, that
And then
sucks. I hate him too.
It continues on because you do a whole dungeon to prove yourself worthy of the artifact you are in Stormheim to get, and then he goes, I'll let you have it. But I'm not actually helping you unless you kill Helya for me.
Oh, Jesus.
So then you go on a raid to do just that, but you can't just go and kill Helya. You have to go to the Halls of Elder again and fight Odin's Chosen to do it.
And then fight Odin again, because he's not convinced after the last dozen times you've earned his favor and proven yourself. You have to prove yourself again, because like we said earlier, Odin doesn't trust anything that isn't specifically forged by a Titan.
I don't think I want to play this game.
Yeah, it's World of Warcraft.
Great
Of course you
game.
don't.
Odin's just like the villain nobody ever knew we needed.
And like what I like best about this is like it's Odin being a villain only by exacerbating character traits that have existed for Odin since the Eddas.
Yeah,
he
that's
does
pretty good.
He does the undercover boss shit. He does cutting his eye out for knowledge. It's all of this just taken to its logical extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not done yet because Odin shows up again.
Oh, we're not. What? Oh my god.
So the next time
Odin
we see
is like one of the... I don't want to call him a principal character, but he ends up essentially creating the main plot of the worst expansion in the game, Shadowlands.
So
okay, this
so
is it.
the next time we see him is in Shadowlands.
That was the expansion that had a lot of people go to Final Fantasy XIV.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was. And like speaking as someone who played Shadowlands from beginning to end, I can't blame you. I really can't.
It was a big exodus. It
Shadowlands
really put
fucking sucked.
really put like a hard hit to Final Fantasy servers. Those queue times were like 2-3 hours at one point.
Like
It sucked
for
ass.
years upon years, people talked about the WoW killer, and you just had to wait for WoW to do it.
While shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah, WoW just kind of put itself out of its misery for a couple of years.
But
It's making a comeback.
To the point.
Maybe. We'll see. Blizzard's not really doing great in their long-term games right now.
Well,
Other companies really are stepping up.
No, its
game's in a
numbers
good
are the best they've been in a decade.
Yeah, the game's in a good state right now, but that's not what we're talking about. So, Shadowlands is all about the realms of death. And so, you meet Odin after the first major content patch, where now Helya is being a more active antagonist. Like, you saw her there at the very beginning, but she didn't really do anything aside from establish that, like, hey, you're in my domain now.
You're
this
in
isn't
my
doing-
world now.
Exactly. For me, as a warrior main, who has been a warrior main since 2008, I get pulled into the Halls of Valor again, and everyone's like, welcome, Battle Lord.
No.
So I'm like, so asshole, are you gonna actually help this time, or are you just gonna pontificate and make me do all the work? Oh, I'm doing all the work? Okay. And so he doesn't really do anything of substance aside from remind you that he is in fact a complete fucking asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And is only not an antagonist because his goals align with the PCs.
Oh.
It's really funny if you're not a warrior getting called into that storyline, because he essentially just yanks you into his chamber and goes, hey, mortal, I don't trust you, but I can't be bothered to do this myself. You know how we talked about how Odin sacrificed his eye?
Yep.
Yes.
We didn't talk about who he sacrificed it to, because it's not Mimir.
Oh.
It is a troll god known as Muezala, who is
That's a name.
essentially not really the god of the dead, but more the god of death.
Okay.
They have an actual god of the dead whose name is Blansamdi, and he's great.
And
A
he's
little
the
bit of a
best.
menace, but he's great. Muezala is very evil, and
Okay.
works with basically every other villain you could ever possibly think of with any connection to death.
Mm.
And in one of the least set up Warcraft villains of all time, what Muezala does is he hands Odin's eye to a guy known as the Jailer, who's essentially just the keeper of damned souls,
And almost single-handedly killed the franchise.
and almost single-handedly killed the franchise because he showed up out of nowhere and claimed responsibility for the entire plot of the entire franchise.
That's it, champion! Poop out those ember seeds!
Oh god.
That joke won't make sense to a lot of people, but to the people it does,
It will make
Yeah.
sense to the right people.
yeah, it'll make sense to the people it needs to make sense to. Yeah, so Odin's Eye is a literal boss fight in one of the raids.
Hell yeah. That's fucking awesome.
Because the jailer
Oh,
turns it
that's
into a
stupid.
weapon and essentially reverses the connection. So what we find out is that the jailer used Odin's eye to essentially see how Odin gave his eye to understand all of the realm of death.
Uh-huh.
The jailer used the eye to understand all of the realms of the living.
Oh. All right,
Which
I
is
hate
kind
that.
of interesting,
Yeah.
except everything around it sucks. So it's not. Yeah, so you just have Odin's eye following you around, telling you how the jailer's gonna win, and then you go to a raid and you kill the eye of the jailer, which is Odin's eye. And Odin doesn't really react to that.
Huh. I think I have
Actually,
some
when you
opinion.
when Odin finds out you're gonna like strike down his eye, he's like, "Oh, cool! I've been meaning to do that for a while. Why didn't you? You have access to do it."
They just
No,
need you to do
didn't
his
care.
chores.
Yeah, Odin basically tells you he didn't care until now.
Yeah.
And he doesn't care that the jailer is trying to destroy all of reality to rewrite the rules between life and death. He just cares that the jailer has his eye.
Because that doesn't affect his position.
Well, this is Odin with a Y, not Odin with an I, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so then after that,
No, that was a bad joke. Don't all three of you be like, yeah, no, no, that was nothing. I gave you nothing. That doesn't even make sense, because Odin still does have one eye. Like, it'd be like if it was two eyes and they changed one of them to, like, no, don't encourage me.
He
Go
may
on,
have
Jen.
an eye, but he sure doesn't have any vision.
Ah, that's a joke.
so then Odin drops out of the plot of Shadowlands after that, and we don't see him again until the following expansion, Dragonflight, which, as the name implies, is all about the dragons. So during that, we meet a dragon named Viranoth, and she is an old
Dragon
old
Liberation Front, I think I could roughly summarize her politics as.
Viranoth
Nice.
is the best. Viranoth is the best.
Like, if Odin didn't trust the dragons in ordering them, Viranoth is like the leader of a group of dragons who doesn't trust the Titans.
Let me put it this way: Viranoth is the mean gay you wanted your back.
Ah,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, literally.
Me.
So in the last major patch for Dragonflight, Viranoth learns about how Odin feels about dragons, which is that he doesn't like dragons, but what he did do was he subjugated an entire subspecies of dragons to his will. The storm dragons, eventually, basically, their circumstances means that they're forced to serve Odin. And she's like, what the
Ooh.
fuck?
Yeah, because we know that the Storm Dragons and Odin have a connection, but the way Odin explains that in Legion is that he gave them their power, which we understand because the Vrykul consider Odin the Storm God.
Okay.
So we go, okay, so he imbued them with some of his power as like a reaction to empowering the other dragons.
Now,
No, he created them wholesale, specifically to control them.
Now, all the other stuff about how Odin violated his adopted daughter's free will, how he's subjugating other races into his service, that doesn't matter. But the fact that he subjugated dragons to his
Well.
will,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that got Viranoth's attention.
Well, to be fair,
Viranoth was very upset about it.
she is. I get maybe why she has like specific things she's gonna personally care about.
Oh, she absolutely does.
Yeah.
So she goes to the Halls of Valor
Mhm.
and kicks Odin's ass.
Nice.
And, like, the only reason she doesn't kill him, it's very bait. It's like, in your moments, I want you to remember, I beat you.
I do love that as a trope. Like, I want you to live on knowing that I bested you, and that's my revenge.
And she goes to all the storm dragons assembled there. It's like, Odin is undone by my hand. Be free. And all the storm dragons leave to go join Viranoth.
Nice. Hell yeah.
We also get one of the best choices for player dialogue, and I think the entire game's 20-year history.
Yeah, okay, so when Viranoth announces her intention to go after Odin, for most players, you'll see, I I can't wait to punch Odin in the face. Or,
Nice.
Odin is powerful, we should be careful. But like me, if you're a warrior main and you've done the warrior campaign, you will see, I know Odin personally, we should be careful. Or, I know Odin personally, I cannot wait to punch him in the face.
That's so good.
I think the exact line is, I know Odin personally. I cannot express how long I've been waiting to punch him in the face.
Nice. Hell yeah.
I just looked up Veranoth. Yeah, she's fucking great. Wow, look at her.
Veranoth is amazing.
Veranoth is the best.
Veranoth is so good, it made me hate a character made me love a character I used to hate just because he hung out with her.
Yeah, that's high praise right there.
Well, does anyone actually hate Rathion, or are they just annoyed with Rathion because he's against their current agenda?
Yes. Both of those things are true.
True. Odin in Warcraft is probably the biggest example of how far you can take typical Odin traits to make them an antagonist without actually making him an antagonist.
Yeah, here's what I love. As soon as I was like, okay, Tim and AJ hate Odin. They must hate Odin because of some sort of like pop culture thing, because the Eddas do not support this level of. But I was like, this is a deep hate. I'm so excited. And what I'm trying to get at is that it makes the most sense that it's not just Odin from a movie, a comic, a one-off video game. It's Odin in Warcraft, this long, ongoing campaign that, like, this character has been a thorn in your side for
9 years?
Almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
And so the hatred...
Well, he first appeared in 2016, so 9 years.
So 9 years. Okay, I was like, said you were a warrior since 2008, but he appeared in... Yeah, so almost a decade. That hatred has been brewing. It's like a fine tea. You gotta give it enough time to seep.
Exactly.
And then you take a sip and it burns your mouth.
To wrap it all up, we are... Like, everybody I've talked to about it is 99.9% sure he is going to be one of the villains by the end of this trilogy of expansions.
I was honestly shocked he wasn't a raid boss in Dragonflight.
Yeah, so was I, honestly.
It sounds like they understand the next step.
Because there have been characters who are more conventionally heroic that we have fought as raid bosses for lesser pretenses.
Yeah, and the ending of Dragonflight is essentially the dragons getting their powers back and realizing they're not bound to the Titans anymore.
Nice.
Which, Tyr, one of the other Titan Keepers, who is much friendlier to the dragons, even starts going, yeah, I really don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if I trust that. And basically what everybody said in response to that was, if Tyr is saying this, how do you think Odin feels right now?
Mm-hmm.
So we're all pretty sure we're going to have to kill Odin before long.
Well, I look forward to y'all getting to punch Odin in the face again.
I'll take out his other eye when I go for it.
That's perfect. I think with that, let's...
Wait, I missed one.
You didn't, though, DJ.
did.
You didn't miss one.
I
Which
did.
one? Which one did you miss?
So Odin shows up twice in the East series.
Is it Odin?
Under 2 different names.
There it is.
Yeah, that's Odin, all right.
Go on.
So in East 9, Monstrum Nox,
Uh-huh.
it's very Norse heavy. In fact, the region, it's like the mythology that this game like takes from is literally like the in-game name of it is Norse without the E at the end of it. And the 2 head gods are Grimnir and Loki.
So Grimnir's just Odin.
Yeah. And Grimnir is just Odin.
It means masked one. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah, Grimnir had like Valkyries that he had like tasked with keeping the I can't remember how they pronounced it. Lumers in check. And yeah, they've been dealing with that for the last 500 years. And then in East 10, he shows up again under the name Har. Once again, just one of Odin's names.
Just one of Odin's names, though.
Yeah.
One of his 170 names.
Yep, just one of them. And it's, again, this one actually, it's the Normans, though, instead of the Norse, which
Interesting. Okay.
both me and Aiden were like, it's just kind of weird that Odin shows up twice.
I had a nickel. AJ, you want to say that really good line one more time?
Well, I'll take out his other eye when I go for it.
Excellent. All right, fantastic. All right. Tim, AJ, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your hatred of Odin with a Y. Thank you for joining us for our 100th episode.
Thank you so much for having us. This was a wonderful time. I'm glad we were here.
Yeah, this is a monumental occasion, episode 100. I'm very glad.
Thank
we
you
got
guys
to be
so
on
much
here.
for joining
It's an
us. It was a
honor.
blast having you.
Where can our listeners find more of you?
You can find us more on AJ. I've had too much rum to comprehend.
I have seen many cups that I thought were empty and saw they got full again.
You can find us on Standby Line. We're available just about anywhere Muses of Mythology is, I would bet.
I just can't articulate the words of where we are.
Beyond that, you can't find me anywhere else. I've been very careful about that.
AJ's smarter than everyone else.
He is. I'm not ashamed to admit that. Occasionally, we post on Instagram, usually when one of us does something fun at the park that we want to share pictures of.
Or when
No.
Darien has access to the Instagram.
Which was the one time, and I didn't even use it as much as I wanted to. No.
Technically, you still do have access.
I logged out of respect, and I didn't save the password. Like, I would never do that to y'all. I should have, though. What I should have done is stayed in there, because it's like, when we do fun stuff at the parks, we post on Instagram. No, you post in the Discord server. That's where you post the fun done at the parks. That doesn't make it to the Instagram. So yeah, I should have stayed logged in so I could fucking take the pictures you put in the Discord server and put on your goddamn Instagram where they belong.
Then people could find me other places. I gotta pay for that information.
No, you just post after you were there. You don't post while you're there. All right, it's the end of the episode, which means it's the end of season 5. We are done talking about Norse mythology. Unless another book comes out. Yay! Which means it is time for the traditional in-between seasons Muses hiatus. DJ, when will we be back?
April.
That was very matter of fact.
Just April, yeah?
I assume
Yeah.
April 8th?
We could say April 1st, but I don't think anyone would believe us. So yeah, Tuesday, April the 8th. It's a little bit of a longer break, so rather than going radio silent like we usually do, we will be releasing episodes from Bunker 9 on the main feed during hiatus, still with the bi-weekly release schedule. So
Yes.
we don't want to be completely zero gone for y'all. But also because I want to maintain downloads. That's really
Yeah.
also for real. I gotta maintain so we don't have a hard crash. So you'll still be getting content on the main feed. And if you're a Patreon, you're like, well, I've already listened to that. You have, but we will still be posting Patreon stuff because y'all are paying us. So you still get all the new stuff. Don't even worry about it, gang. Tim, I got you,
Money
my
is a
friend.
strong motivator.
I'll tell you what. It's not going to take another 3 years to get us back on because Egypt mythology. I am fucking on that.
Oh, we haven't formally announced that yet. Yeah, so we're going to come back in April. We're going to start with the Kane Chronicles, everybody. It's time to get into Egyptian mythology.
Okay.
Let's go.
I was a
Very
fucking
excited.
Egyptology kid.
I gotta look into that. I may have to jump in on a couple of points too.
If we thought it was hard to do Norse mythology, you wait to hear how unraveled Darien becomes trying to handle Egyptian mythology. It's going to be a time.
Just
but I'm
wait
excited.
until you have to start parsing out what was Hellenistic and what was actually authentically Egyptian. We don't know.
We don't know. It's just like this all over again. But hey, DJ's
Yeah, and
never read
Ra
the Kane
said
Chronicles.
Alexander was the son of Zeus.
Of course he did. So, and DJ's never read the Kane Chronicles before, so this will be
Nope.
fun for him. He
Yeah,
gets to
it's
see
gonna be
the
great.
he
New
gets to meet the
experiences.
magicians. I think DJ, you're gonna love the magicians.
I'd
I
say I
believe
do it at work, but we actually don't have the King Chronicles in my school library.
You don't.
That's kind of unfortunate.
I know we have Percy Jackson. We have at least the first Magnus Chase. We definitely don't have King Chronicles.
Oh,
I think I have a couple of the Kane Chronicles books in my personal library because I just found them places.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, but like growing up, my life, like I read all of these books coming out from the library because I was a kid and I wasn't being able to like buy these books with my own money. I own them now, obviously, I'm a grown up.
The public library I work at has these. The school library does not.
Oh, okay,
that's so strange.
That's so
I
sad.
mean, no, I guess that kind of makes sense.
If the podcast mailed the school you work at copies of the Kane Chronicles, would you put them in the library?
I can make barcodes and put them in the system.
Yeah. Okay.
Who needs approval?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we could do that. That could be a fucking monthly donation. Is we're gonna send the Kane Chronicles to this New York library where Tim works, so the children can read them. We need to leave. This episode has 4 audio tracks and is over 2 hours long. So future Darien is gonna down this witch's brew Alani knew that my stepsister gave me. It was
damn. Where did she find that? We are not selling that anymore, Darien. That is not being stocked anywhere.
She bought
my company delivers that shit. Okay, that's my company.
She stocked up in October, but that bitch is pregnant again, so she can't drink it. So, I know, I'm so excited for her. No, it's wonderful. We're so happy for her. It's gonna be. I call her bitch. It's affectionate. No, we're so happy for her. I'm so excited for her. Like, it's gonna be wonderful. They want to have like a bunch of kids. So, but she's like, I said like, do you have a witch's brew? And she's like, I bought a bunch, and now I can't drink it. Do you want it? Please take it out of my house. I can't even have it. So, yeah. So
when it works,
Future Darren's gonna chug that, edit 4 audio track 2 hour long episode. But hey, it's not what Leo from Gaming Theater Presents had to do, so he still gets the crown. Plug for another podcast. Plug for our Patreon. Patreon.com I'll let DJ do it.
Patreon.com/Music Mythology. You better believe it. We have so much wonderful content over there. We'd love to see you over there. Simply $5 a month is going to get you all of our Bunker 9 bonus episodes. There's a ton of content, and when I say
as a patron,
I mean
I'm
quite
very
literally
satisfied with the library.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you so much. I mean, quite literally, as many main feed episodes as there are Bunker 9 episodes, as well as on top of that, the rest of Musemas. I know you all got one for free. If you really like that, there's more. There are 33 more episodes to Musemas that you guys have not heard.
So if you missed us over the next 2 months, that's where you can find us. You can also find us on Instagram. You can also find us on YouTube. The goddess videos I've been posting have been doing like super well over there. So like,
absolutely.
Yeah, you can find us there too, I guess. Maybe I'll do more long form content over the break and experiment. But hey, thank you again, Tim and AJ. Thank you all, dear listeners. If this is your very first episode, hey, welcome. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've been with us since episode 1, I think it was, we called it episode 1, and now they're called stories when we became music. If you were here from Podcast to Poseidon to today, thank you.
Thank you.
My God,
it's outstanding.
My first episode was on 4 years ago.
Yeah, we talk about Storkules then.
We did, yes, and that was a lot of fun.
The cruel march of time makes fools of us all.
With that, we will be back in your ears on Tuesday, April the 8th, to talk about the Kane Chronicles. And until then, don't be like Zeus.
Don't be like Zeus.
See you real soon.
Toodles.
Muses of Mythology is created and hosted by Darien and DJ Smart. It's edited by Darien Smart. The show is produced by Darien and DJ Smart, as well as
Tim O'Connor, The Crystal Conman, Nicholas Miller. Our music is Athens Festival by Martin Hain, and our cover art is by Audrey Miller. You can find her on Instagram at Bombshell Nutshell Art.
Want more Muses of Mythology? Support the show on Patreon. Just $1 gets you exclusive bonus content. Get more at patreon.com/Muses of Mythology.
You can also support the show by leaving a review at lovethepodcast.com/Muses of Mythology, or tell a friend why you love the show.
Don't forget to check out all of our episodes and episode transcripts at musesofmythology.com.
Thanks for listening.